Hey everyone, Ian Benjamin Digital Hub. Yes, this is a special one. I am with my brother from another mother. We're both 6'6" plus. I'm 6'10", and Sergio 6'8", 6'7". Is that right?
6'8".
6'8", man. Damn, yeah, I
There
remember you
you
really
go.
catching me up. I didn't like it. And so Sergio Panday. Sergio Panday is the CEO, founder of Roots Inspire. But prior to that, a investment banking guru, senior banker, done really, really well, very, very academic. Sergio was born in Curacao, which is where he now lives. However, he was raised in Amsterdam, and all his schooling was done there, and done significantly well. Rose through the ranks at ABN AMRO in the investment banking world. Done his time there, became a social entrepreneur, and has founded Roots Inspire, which I love. I've got the t-shirt on today, so you watching it can see me. Sergio's got his one on as well.
Yeah, you're rocking it a bit better than me though, because mine is
mean?
dropping off the screen.
Oh yeah, you got to pump your chair
That
up.
big chest of yours.
yeah, he's wearing it. Roots Inspire in the house. And so Sergio started Roots Inspire, which is a platform you for inspirational leadership mentoring programs, how to network the corporate world for individuals from ethnic backgrounds who are then mentored on a program by other individuals of color that they can from different industries or from their industry. And so there's 2 or 3 programs that are live right now. There's a new student program as well. But look, I'm gonna pass it over to you, Sergio, for you to do a bit of an introduction, and you'll say it a lot better than I will. So without further ado,
Well,
let's go.
yeah, and thanks for having me on, man.
No,
Like you said, brother from another mother. When we found out, we were both like 6 foot,
6
you know,
plus.
well, 6.5 plus, 6'8"
Yeah.
plus, crazy.
Yeah.
But no, thanks for having me on, and yeah, and you know, giving me the platform to share a bit about why recruitment is not enough, right? Because
Yes.
the topic for today is also an interesting one, especially that you're in recruitment. But I think it's great to sort of address like what needs to happen after, right?
100%. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, so myself, like you said, born in the Caribbean, not in Curacao though, in Suriname, but my mom is from Curacao, but raised in the Netherlands.
Right.
And then in banking, 18 years, 10 years in Amsterdam, and then 8 years in Singapore.
That's right. Yep. Fantastic.
And Roots Inspire, I mean, maybe first what it is, like we build ethnically diverse leadership pipeline. So it's very much what the name says. Like we say, okay, Roots inspired to greatness, right? So we have a big panel of ethnic role models in corporate leadership positions that are involved in the program as mentors, one-on-one mentoring, group mentoring. We do workshops on corporate politics, on sponsor relationships, on personal branding. So very much the building blocks to get more people of color, more ethnic professionals into corporate leadership roles.
Definitely.
So that's sort of the short version of it. But yeah, today's topic, recruitment is not enough. Love the topic. But I'll let
me
you...
too. Love it. It's so true. I mean, we've touched on it before. Individuals at various levels that are of color, from a graduate level through to senior level, they're in a position, they don't feel supported. Nobody looks like them. They feel isolated. I heard this yesterday from an organization that I do some work with called WYK, WYK, which means what you know. They're sponsored by the Princess Trust and a few other corporations, and they know and said to me that that a lot of individuals of color after the program, they get into a role through an introduction from WYK, and they don't feel supported. The candidate doesn't feel, the new employee does not feel supported by that company. They don't want to ask silly questions. They feel isolated. Everyone's moving at 100 miles an hour. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Recruitment is not enough. Once someone's in that role, I mean, it'd be good to try and unravel and unpack why that is. So, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
what's your experience of that, or what have you seen about that?
Yeah, so I was looking at data, right? And there's not a lot on the actual numbers on, you know, how many people ethnic professionals get in and what are the retention rates. So there's no sort of general data available, but I know some of the companies are tracking it, and there's a big problem in retention rates if you compare sort of, you know, ethnic professionals to the rest. And I think
Right.
it's because people don't feel that they fit in. Often you come into an environment where you're the only one. I mean, being the only one is already, you know, putting extra pressure on you. Not the right guidance. Don't feel sort of that you're part of it or know how the game works really. So there's a lot of talent that gets lost and leaves even at the start of their careers, let alone later when, you know, you get to that leadership level where people climb up to sort of senior professional level, but they're not considered for leadership positions, and
Yeah.
you know, frustration kicks in and they decide to leave
Yeah.
the corporate world, right? So
100%. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree with you. I see it all the way through. Being a recruiter, speaking to candidates of color that don't want to leave, they'd rather to sit on their hands and not leave, but they won't go for promotion within an organisation because they don't feel as though they're going to be supported, or they've been knocked back so many times, and they just sit there on their hands and just stay where they are, and other individuals in their team are surpassing them on the career ladder within that organisation. But what strikes me as peculiar is that over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a lot of companies, of corporate companies, have or introduce ERGs, employee resource groups, where mental health, well-being, ethnic minority groups are put in place within these organizations. And you would think that they would support and help encourage ethnic employees. And, you know, so that is one thing that's in place. What else do you think can be done, or where are those ERGs falling down? What type of things do you feel as though could improve that lack of those high retention rates? Sorry, low retention rates.
yeah, I think ERGs can really work, right? I've seen some very powerful ERGs that get a lot done within organizations. And I think if those ERGs are run well and they have the power, it's absolutely a big part of the solution. What you often see, though, is that people that are involved in the ERGs, they do it in their spare time. Right? They don't get the recognition necessarily for the work, the additional work that they're doing, and it's quite taxing. Right? It's not only sort of workload, but also emotionally. Right? If you're invested in something, you want to see change. You're inspired to put in the work. If then the organization doesn't follow or you don't get things done, that's emotionally taxing as well. So I think where it often lacks is there's no playbook for the ERGs, or there's not the support for the ERGs, and somebody gets thrown in there, you know, expecting to do amazing things, but then without the right support, the right recognition, you know, people get burned out by it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for the ones that you've seen work, are there like 2 or 3 initiatives or components that you've seen work effectively?
The ones that I see work have senior people involved, right? So that know how the organization works, know how to talk to senior management, and can really be spokespeople of what needs to happen or what the sentiment is within the company. I
Okay.
think you need to make that connection with senior management, and you need to have people powerful enough to do that. Now, budget and stuff, and that's important, but it almost follows, right? If you have somebody that can represent an ERG and fight for that budget, often it will follow.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. So, are there any particular activities that you liked, or any initiatives that, with a well-funded ERG, they were able to put X, Y, Z in place, and that has worked? I mean, is there anything particular that you've seen work effectively?
Yeah. So I think, the biggest problem for retention, and I'll take a few step backs, right, from the discussion on the ERG. But I think the biggest problem with retention is that companies put emphasis on getting the diversity numbers up, and they do it through recruitment. So they say, oh, we don't have any diversity, or the representation is not what it should be. Let's focus on recruitment and get those numbers up. And then if you're not giving the proper guidance to the new recruits, but especially to the people that you already have, right, then the people that are already there are not going to be great ambassadors. They don't feel supported. They don't feel like there's a chance for them to move up in the organization. So if the little diverse staff that you have, if you don't support them and guide them sort of towards being successful in the company, then they're going to not, be great.
They can't show
ambassadors.
People. Yeah.
And it's gonna affect new joiners as well.
New employees, yeah, exactly right. So maybe do you think it was a rush 3, 4, 5 years ago, 3, 4 years ago, George Floyd, BLM, massive D&I, ethnic drive to kind of like get things in place? Well, it should have been thought through more in terms of supporting existing people of color, putting some things in place so that individuals of color, feel more committed and would champion their employer. But
absolutely. Because you asked me on, okay, what have I seen work for ERGs, and when does it work, when doesn't it work? Well, absolutely, when people are ambassadors of their company because they feel they get the support, they feel heard, they feel seen, they feel that they have the opportunity and the tools and the network to progress their careers, that's when they'll be strong supporters of the ERG as well. And that's when an ERG is successful. If you say like, well, things are not great, employee morale is not great, let's put an ERG in place, right?
Yeah.
Then you're like, putting an ERG in place is not the support that these individuals need, right? It's almost like
tokenism.
Well, it's part of the solution. It's not the solution.
Yeah.
Let me put it like that.
Yeah. It can be tick boxing. It's got to be more of a structure and a plan. Like 3, 4, 5, 6, 10-step plan to recognize that, wow, okay, we didn't know that was the case. We want to put something in place now to help develop your career, support you, not just by giving it a label. We've got an ERG. The steps are, we're going to maybe sponsor you, spend some time in the boardroom, and really map out and have a look at the data to see where you could have missed out in terms of salary increases or other types of steps to advance within the business, and make sure those are nailed down and followed up upon. Do you know what I mean? Because historically, again, I'm talking from a recruitment perspective. When I reach out to candidates of color, some of them are really, really frustrated in terms of other people surpassing them in different careers, and that there's little they can do about that because there hasn't been that concrete career path structure that's in place, that's nailed down for them to work towards or work with somebody towards? I mean, have you seen a similar type of thing as well? Have you heard of this, similar types of scenarios?
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, you can't really, like, everybody's looking for this one solution, right? And I think there's a lot of different elements that have to come together to make for a successful solution. And one of the elements is you can't recruit people and put them in a culture that's toxic or that's not inclusive, or right. So people say, okay, well, culture needs to change. How do we change culture? And then they say, we're going to put all the managers on unconscious bias trainings or inclusive leadership trainings, and thinking that is like the holy grail and that's the solution. And I'm not saying like these things don't work at all, but there's also plenty of research that shows like individually they don't work, right? It needs to be part of a bigger strategy where you would say like, okay, we work with leadership, we have an ERG, we support that ERG, we support individual talent, to give them the tools and the guidance to be successful at the company. We work on representation because often companies are stuck in this vicious cycle, right? Where there's no representation at the senior levels. So people that are up and coming in the organization feel like, oh, well, does this work for me? Is there a glass ceiling here? What's the deal? So if they don't see the representation already, sort of engagement starts to drop, or they start to think like, maybe this is not the right spot for me. And then that, along with not the proper guidance, the proper mentoring, the proper sponsorship, to really sort of guide them in their careers, then you get this vicious cycle being continued, right? Because if they start to leave, or if they start to settle at a level that's not their full potential, then 5 years later, you still don't have the representation. So you're just stuck in this loop.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think maybe now, because there's been, over the last 3 years, there's been an escalation in getting more support for people of color within organizations, and they're realizing that it's more than one element, more than one component. It's got to be a program. So maybe now, with recognition of that, acknowledgement of that, things might start to change, because it's no secret that the retention rate is becoming an issue now. Yeah. Where people are, people of color are not staying in their roles. So where a company might think, well, we put some D&I stuff in place, we've done some unconscious bias training, we celebrate Black History Month and Eid, or whatever the case may be. They got to realize that it's got to be unpacked. The strategy has got to be unpacked, and they've got to re-look at what to put in place, because I had a conversation yesterday, as I said, with WIC about their graduates who've gone through their program, and they face retention issues. Another one of my clients, again, they said 75% of their early career employees, again, 75% leave within the first year. I couldn't believe it. Crazy. 75%. And so yeah, I think it's less further up the food chain, because there's fewer people of color further up the food chain. So there's but still it's still the same thing.
Yeah. So with Roots Inspire, we focus very much on sort of senior professionals into leadership, right? Giving the guidance from going to senior professional level. That's often people choosing the strategy where they say like, hey, I'm a bit different from everyone else here. How does this work? I'm just going to keep my head down, work really hard, and then my work is going to speak for me, right? And then in the first years of your career, that works, and you start to make your initial promotions. You even get to a senior level, maybe as an individual contributor. But for leadership, that's like a completely wrong strategy. And all of a sudden, you know, the organization looks at them and say, yeah, they're a great professional, but leadership, you know, I don't know. And so that's where we focus. Now, what we often see with companies is they say, well, we don't really have that mid layer, or yeah, we only have, you know, 5 people, 10 people that we can think of, you know, out of the top of our head. So they say we don't have those numbers, so we need to focus on recruitment because that's where the problem is, right? And then they focus on recruitment, and then they have people coming in that are gonna either, you know, get stuck somewhere in the middle again, or they're gonna get frustrated and leave after a few years. So they're spending all these money on recruitment efforts, which is great for your business, right? but it's not yielding them enough if you know, people don't stay and are not put in an environment where they can be successful. And that's eventually what the recruitment industry also doesn't want, right? Like when you place candidates, you want them to succeed and you want them to sort of climb the ranks.
Yeah, definitely. I want them to stay for several reasons. I want them to stay. I want them to say, well, this is a great company. It bonds me with that employer. It helps the candidate's career path. And so yeah, it's a win-win for everybody at that individual stage. You know what I mean? You know, but yeah, it's broken. Absolutely right. It isn't enough. There's got to be some change. Some of the things that I've heard that I like where the company recognizes there's few people of color in those senior leadership positions or even board level, C-suite, and they sponsor individuals of color that have shown some leadership potential, where they then allow them to take part in board meetings, giving them that exposure to discussions, how things work in the boardroom. And I think that's a great initiative. I think a lot more companies should do that.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely. I mean, I would break it down into like a couple of things that I've seen working, especially jointly, right? I think a big one is representation. If companies don't have the senior representation, then find ways to still bring that representation in. Get external speakers. Get, you know, when you're doing trainings and bring in workshop trainers, show that diversity. Show people like, hey, we know that we don't have enough representation, but we're sourcing that in, right, to inspire people. So I think representation is a great one. Second one is sponsorship. I think personally, I think internal programs, initiatives should focus on sponsorship. Like too often, they're focused on mentorship, and then it gets very, I mean, a bit complex. Is it reverse mentorship? Is it regular mentorship? Is my mentor my sponsor, or is it not my sponsor? I love to make it very clear and say, no, internally, someone senior is basically assigned to you as your sponsor, right? So they have a task to open doors for you, to open their network for you.
Yeah.
And then the mentorship and the reverse mentorship, that will happen in the process. Like that's very important and that's very valuable, but will happen in the process. But making those roles very clear, I think helps. So sponsorship is a big one.
Yeah. That's good.
Then mentorship. I believe in external mentorship. I mean, big part of the Roots Inspire program is focused around mentorship. To have that safe space to work on, you know, your like the unwritten rules of corporate life. How does the game work? You know, how do I get more visible in a way that feels natural to me? I don't want to all of a sudden become someone that I'm not and scream off the top of the roofs like how great I am and all the projects I worked on. Like if that's not me, that's not going to work for me. But there are ways to still put your brand out there and build your brand in a way that feels natural to you.
Yeah, definitely. Right? So, I mean, because it could be, maybe you don't want to play golf, you don't like going out on drinks, you don't want to go to the corporate Christmas party or whatever it is, and you feel as though that you need to be a part of those internal initiatives and activities to improve your chances of being acknowledged and being to get those opportunities. But that isn't always the right way to do things. You know, it's not authentic to individuals. You know what I mean? So you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think I said to you before as well, it's so much easier to speak to somebody externally about where you want to go in your career, what you want to achieve, and what you're seeing, than telling somebody internally that may have preconceived ideas, or it's not only that. I mean, you sometimes would feel reluctant to share certain things with somebody internally because you don't know who they're going to share it with, who works
exactly,
who they're going to tell. You know, I mean, you know, so
yeah, and so external mentoring provides that safe space, right?
yeah.
It's you can you know, if you feel like bitching about your manager or about your situation, you can, right? You can, and from that you can get the proper guidance, and you can get suggestions, and you can ask how others did it. And so I believe in that safe space for mentoring. I mean, we've mentioned ERGs already. I think peer groups are very important to not have it be a lonely experience, right? We all face similar challenges. To be able to share that with others, to learn from others on how they deal with it, how they find solutions, is very powerful. I like external peer groups as well, because very often we think the grass is greener elsewhere. So
Yeah.
I came up in banking, right, and in so the corporate banking side of things, which I always thought like, okay, this is a banking problem. And more specifically, this is like a corporate wholesale investment banking problem, right? And when I say this problem, I mean just a lot of white guys from very privileged backgrounds that sort of have their path laid out for them, and no diversity, no gender diversity, no ethnic diversity, no, like very little, especially when you get to the top levels, there's nothing there. So
Yeah.
so my assumption was that if you look at, you know, companies like I don't know, the cool brands like Nike and Adidas, or you know, that the environment there would be totally different at the top, which
Yeah.
often it's not, right? So this is not a sector problem, it's not a company problem, it's sort of across the board. So if you have a peer group with others in another industry or in another company that you see like, oh, wait a minute, they have the same challenges over there, and I'm gonna have to find a solution around this, and I'm gonna have to find a way that works for me,
Yeah.
because leaving and going somewhere else is not going to be the solution.
Right.
Right. So I like that sort of external peer group part of it.
So just that's a good point. So hold that thought. So is that what you actually did think then when you were with ABN AMRO, you know, heading up for the ranks and so forth, few people of color? Did you think that maybe it's different in other industries? I mean, did you actually live that yourself? Did you live that yourself,
Oh,
or did you?
no, absolutely. I was always the only one.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, and the more you climb the ranks, the more you're
Yeah,
going to be the only one.
isolated
Right?
even more.
Yeah. And I mean, there's definitely a difference between industries. Like some industries are more diverse than others.
Right.
And you have
Okay.
industries where it's all, you know, all female, right? Like, and so there's definitely differences between industries. But I found, like, through Roots Inspire, through the work we do with Roots Inspire, I found out that the higher you climb the ranks, it's going to be the same problems everywhere.
Yeah. Or maybe even worse, because I mean, there's fewer people of color, you know, in those senior positions.
Yeah, so that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So whether it's in the retail industry, whether it's in
Doesn't
financial
matter. Yeah. Exactly.
services,
Doesn't
whether
matter.
it's in consultancy, when you get to the top levels,
Yeah.
the diversity is very, very weak.
Yeah.
And often board level, they solve it. because they bring in some external hire at board level. And I think once you get to board level, you're super popular because everybody wants you on their board for the diversity. But the level below, that's where the problem is, right? The two levels below. And that's actually the level that runs the company.
Yeah.
Right. So and if you're not focused on pipeline, but you're focused on recruitment, hiring, it's always going to be a short-term solution.
Sure.
So I think recruitment is definitely part of the solution. It's not the solution.
No, that's right. Yeah, exactly. It's got to be supported, as you mentioned. There's different elements, different components to that. The strategy has got to be in place. That's that run from the top down. That everyone's got to buy into that. Everyone's got to buy into that, and I think it's got to be driven hard from the top down, consistently. Yeah. Otherwise, it isn't. It falls on deaf ears, and or it just kind of pitters out, which is what's happening now over here in the UK because there was a big hoo-ha, big push 3 years ago nearly with George Floyd. But now it's definitely filtering out, definitely without a doubt. I mean, because what I do in recruitment, I'm speaking to employers all the time about the D&I, and it's becoming less of a significant importance to them now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is,
I think the problem has always been that diversity and inclusion, to me, it needs a big rebranding. Right, it's sort of attached to like a moral obligation, almost like some charity work you do, right? Like, the business is growing great, we're all making money, let's do something on diversity next, right? Yeah. So it's whereas I'm of the view that it creates better teams, it creates better companies, right? And there's plenty of research to show that, but that doesn't mean people actually believe it or that's actually their motivation to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think.
Love that point. So true, man. So true. It is like it has that charity vibe about it. Do you know what I mean? It can even be put away in that charity box. You know what I mean? 100%. Yeah. It's
the difference between, is it agenda point 1 or agenda point 10, right? And if it's agenda point 10 and we're in the market that we're in today, it's going to fall off the agenda. Right, because agenda point 1, 2, and 3 are like, how are we gonna, how are we gonna deal with the downturn in the market? How are we gonna cut costs? How are we gonna And to me, that's a very short-term view. And I use this example, right? So in banking, and I'll like in banking in general. It's a very attractive place for juniors to come in through traineeships. It's a very great learning environment, but often the salaries in private equity are higher, right?
Yeah.
So you see a lot of talent sort of come in banking and do the traineeship, like the first 3 years, and then they're headhunted somewhere else and they go somewhere else. Because, I mean, private equity and other industries, they love people that they don't have to educate from right out of uni, right? If you have 3 years in investment banking, wow, that's great, right? You know how to work, you know how sort of things work, but you're still young enough to mold you.
Yeah.
I use this example, why? Because this problem is a board level discussion, right? Because people know if we don't solve this, if we don't get this right, we're going to have a problem in 5 years and 10 years, right? Because we need that pipeline of young talent coming in and staying.
Yeah.
To me, the diversity and inclusion problem is exactly the same. If you don't solve it, you're going to have a problem in 5 or 10 years. If there's other companies that are doing a great job at it while you're lacking, these other companies are going to be the employer of choice. And with, a shortage of talent, the young generation, not just diverse professionals, but also, other professionals that are part of the majority group, they find these things much more important.
Yeah.
So if you
And
don't have it right and you don't have the right sort of environment, you're going to have a big problem in 5 or 10 years.
definitely, yeah. Because I mean, because by then the horse has already bolted, and your image to anyone from a diverse backgrounds, your image won't be appealing to them. But within 10, 12, 15 years time, the company that has shifted and made change, they will start to be seen as recognized as a inclusive employer, on many levels, not just race, but in terms of mental health, gender, etc., maybe other corporate social responsibility types of things as well. And they will be way ahead of the game, and they'll win. They will win, you know.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the word image, right? Like I think all the companies, they recognize that image is important. I mean, look at any corporate website, and there's a picture of this jolly group of diverse professionals of all ethnicities, of all genders, and all, like, but that's the image.
Yeah.
But now there's platforms like Glassdoor, there's a lot more information being shared. So that image doesn't cut it, right? If you don't have the ambassadors internally to say like, yes, I love working at this place because I feel included, I feel like I can see the path for myself up. If you don't have that, it's going to show.
Yeah, I think companies need to do that. I mean, I do that for my clients, as you know. If they are authentically D&I focused, I love to partner with them and to bring out that element in them, that they are diverse, and have members of their team talking about what they've done and talking positively about the company in that way. And I think candidates will be expecting that in the future. How do I know that they're going to, support me? How do I know that? And I think it goes beyond that as well, from a corporate social responsibility, companies that support the environment,
absolutely,
the carbon footprint, trees. And I've even heard that companies like Apple in the States, I'm not sure what happens in Europe yet, but for example, I heard that in the States, I think it's Apple, that if a lady, female, requires an abortion, I know I'm getting away from things a little bit now, but just to give an example regarding corporate social responsibility, if a lady requires an abortion, they will fly that individual out of state if needed, so she can have that abortion. And I think, because candidates are asking the question, what is that? What do you do regarding the environment? What's your thoughts, or what's your stance on abortions and all that sort of thing? So do you know what I mean?
But to me, there's nothing more powerful than having employees being your ambassadors, right? Because indeed, these policies and what they do and what like all of that is important, and to be able to tell that. But if people that work there don't feel that support is there, don't feel that potential for them is there because of their gender, because of their ethnicity, because or even if there's a slight doubt on that, right? Because I think that's often what it is. It's that little doubt that's there, and that can get frustration, get into frustration.
It can be damaging for them because they can, because the positive side is someone being outspoken about it, said, well, they supported me, my situation was X, Y, and Z, and they done X, Y, and Z for me. That's like, wow, amazing. But but the opposite of that is, no, well, I worked there for 3 years and this happened to me and I didn't get any. Whoa, I mean, that could be damaging on
absolutely,
really massively damaging for them.
Absolutely.
No, but now kind of getting back to that. So let's kind of like focus it. So you obviously recognize this, Roots Inspire supports that. So, but let's just take that back a bit so what made you think that, I need to do something about this? And in terms of the leadership and showing somebody how to navigate the corporate landscape,
I mean, for me, the trigger was George Floyd, right? So I was in my career always, always with a strong sense of, I want to do something back. I mean, I grew up sort of raised by a single mom, not sort of the typical profile you see in the banking world. Found my way through somehow.
So were you like academically gifted with numbers, crunching numbers? What was it that kind of, how did that unfold for you to kind of get in the door and excel?
I mean, honestly, I think I was great. Like school was always easy for me, so I put very little effort in, and still sort of was flying through. I studied econometrics, so very math based. So a profile they love in banking as well. Initially, when I started my career, the only drive was getting a paycheck, right? I wasn't feeling the environment. I wasn't feeling the job or the importance of what I was doing. That only came later, right?
Right. So because
I think
you went out, you came out of university, right? Straight into ABN AMRO, was it, or what was it?
yeah, first ABN AMRO, and then Fortis Bank, which is a bank that doesn't exist anymore. And then I had my own company for a little bit, and then I went back to ABN AMRO, and then I went to Singapore. So I did see sort of different banks, different environments. Yeah, I think especially those early years, it was just the paycheck, right? It was almost like I was living in two separate worlds completely. and it takes confidence, right? Because it's not always like, obviously the outside environment plays a role in how you feel and how how welcome you feel, but a lot is internally as well, right? If I have the scars in life, when people told me like, go back to your own country, and all the stuff we get to experience, growing up in Europe, like you bring those scars along with you, so you're a bit careful. You're not comfortable getting too personal. You're like, okay, I have to keep this very professional, because that's my road to success, right? We're ambitious, we want to be successful, work hard, keep my head down. That's what's going to get me there. So I think as you get to more senior roles, as you start to earn your stripes, that's when you start to feel more comfortable to say like, oh, but I can be who I am. And then then you find out like, wait a minute, it works in my advantage. Like being different from everyone else and having a different perspective, it can work in my advantage if I know how to do that, right? Because we will always have the spotlight. Right? If I make a presentation for the board, I make one good presentation, they will remember me. I mean, I'm 6'8", I'm probably the only black guy they see that day, right?
Yeah.
And I do great, they'll remember me. Whereas someone else that fits the mold, and they need to do 5 good presentations before their name starts to, ring bells. So it has its pros and cons.
Yeah.
But you have to get comfortable with that and know how to twist that into your advantage.
You got to own who you are, man. You got to be happy in your own skin at some stage. You got to become happy with who you are and understand that how you can be perceived. And that can happen at any stage in your life. That can happen when you're a teenager, that you accept who you are and you understand it and you become comfortable with that. Or it can happen much later. It happened much later for me in my mid to late 20s, in terms of I was like, well, look, I'm going to be a huge black guy. And I became comfortable with that. At that time, I was around 27 when I moved to America, actually. And I just kind of had the confidence and, but it's always been self-development. But yeah, with that, you're absolutely right.
And how to do it without the role models, right?
Yeah.
Like
definitely.
Because I remember coming up as sort of a youngster in the banking world, and then there were maybe 2 people in the top 100.
Yeah.
And then even those people, I felt like they're so different from me. Like that's completely not me. So it
Yeah.
almost gives you the wrong signal, like, oh, I need to be like one of these two, and that's not me, so it's not going to work for me.
Yeah.
So that lack of representation, that lack of role models, has a big impact on confidence about sort of, can I be myself or not?
Yeah, totally.
Right?
If you don't know how to, you don't know how to model yourself on it. You can think, well, oh my God, I respect that person, but that isn't me, and
Yeah, and then I mean, and the other way around as well, right? Like with Roots Inspire, we have I think it's over 80 now ethnic corporate leaders that are attached to the program,
superb, man. Well
provide
done.
one-on-one mentoring,
Brilliant.
are involved in sort of group circle discussions. Seeing them being absolutely authentic, owning, being proud of their roots, owning sort of who they are, seeing that gives confidence, right?
Yeah.
That's inspiring, but it also gives that confidence where you see like, oh, wait a minute, if it works for them, it can work for me.
Yeah.
And
Oh man,
maybe I
that's a
should
massive
try that
point.
out a bit more.
Makes you, definitely in terms of like knowing, being authentic, and being confident in becoming your own person. Do you know what I mean? That's so important.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I discussed a couple of elements. We try to support like that mix of it, right? So it's the external mentoring by ethnic corporate leaders, or someone that you don't have to explain yourself to, or don't have to explain situations. You like, if you share like, oh, I came into this meeting room, I made this remark, and it felt a bit like you don't even have to explain to our mentors, because they've been there. They've right. So I think that's a very important element. We're working with senior allies as sponsors, so guiding that sponsor relationship, because sponsorship is super important, but a sponsorship is earned, not given, right? So you can assign sponsors to people, doesn't mean it's going to work out. So we're providing workshops to the sponsors, we're guiding that relationship, we do a handover between the external mentor and the internal sponsor. So we've put sort of the guardrails in place to have that relationship work. And then the peer group element, right? So getting that support from others that are ambitious and are on their way to do things, to break ceilings, and seeing them from other organizations, other industries, even other jurisdictions, even, right? Like that's very inspiring and gives that support that often is lacking.
Okay, good. I mean, the peer group is really, really important to explain that a bit more. So for individuals listening and watching, so the peer group is not the same as a mentor. It's other individuals that have been through the program as well, potentially.
Exactly. That are either following the program now or they followed it in the past. Absolutely, yeah.
And that's really, really key. You think, oh wow, because the individual, the mentee gets 2 bites of the cherry. They get a one-on-one mentor. Then the second bite of the cherry is to like an alumni of individuals that have been through the peer group, that have been through the program, that they can tap into, they can contact and say, look, hi, I'm Ian. I've done the Roots Inspire program for 6 months. I'm in banking, or I'm in supply chain, or I'm in finance. Can I have a one-to-one with you about X,
yeah, and not only that, right? Like also you can see the support on LinkedIn. Like it's amazing for us to see, right?
Yeah.
But if
of course,
if someone on the program has made a promotion, or they're posting, an article on LinkedIn, you can see the others supporting that and showing like, hey, I see you. Right. So I think it's that support that is very valuable, especially because often we're a bit in between worlds, right? Often our family doesn't understand the corporate world, doesn't really know what we're dealing with, right? And then our colleagues at work, they don't understand sort of our personal life and our
wearing 2 hats or 3 hats.
Yeah. And now all of a sudden you have this group of people that are sort of in that same boat with you, right?
They get me.
They're also,
they get me. Yeah.
Exactly. They're also ambitious. They're also working on their personal development, going places, but then also understanding that cultural aspect that comes with it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So let's get back to that. So just real quickly, I'm getting conscious. I know your time is super valuable, but I want to kind of understand a bit more. So George Floyd, that happened, and you thought, you know what, I need to give something back. But to get in that short space of time, it means quite a complex program, different layers that you had to kind of put in place. So how did you unravel that? How did you kind of like, develop, think, okay, it's got to be online? How did that all come into play? How did you just kind of like?
Well, it's the support of others, right? So me and Melvin, Melvin Spalberg, co-founder of Roots Inspire.
Yeah.
It started with us. Like I was in Singapore, he was in Bangkok. The whole Black Lives Matter movement was in full swing. George Floyd just happened. We were super frustrated not being able to participate in the discussion because we're based in Asia and it wasn't a real topic there, right? So we started brainstorming on, okay, what can we do from a distance? And all of a sudden, there's new technology available, right? So mentoring over video call, it was available, but it was never accepted. Right? We didn't believe that you could actually have a relationship with someone over a video call. But the whole pandemic, that sort of brought that that to life.
Became the norm, right? Became normal.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, a lot of possibilities open because, like, if in the business district of Amsterdam, I need to put a program together like what we're doing with Roots Inspire. Well, maybe you can find 10 ethnic corporate leaders, and that's your max. In London, you can find maybe a bit more, but if it's very location dependent, there's a limit to what you can do. We're a virtual platform, right? So we've been running things virtually from the start. So even the team is virtual with people in different locations. So that whole flow was designed from the start to work in a virtual environment, a mentor selection. So people self-select their mentor through our platform where they can see videos and background stories, and then select 2 people, have an introduction
honestly,
call.
It's a brilliant idea. It's so good how you thought it through. Select your mentor, based on the industry they're in or whatever, or fit, and you get a couple of interviews with the individual. I mean, it's just brilliant. So clever.
Yeah, and I mean the support of the mentors, right? Like that was the scary thing. We did a whole interview process beforehand to get to this concept, to try to find out, okay, why do some people get stuck? Why do others break through? What we saw is that those that are in leadership positions and come from ethnic backgrounds, they're often doing it in their own bubble, right? Family doesn't know about the corporate world. Friends that they grew up with don't know. Their path is so different from their peers.
Yeah.
So everybody's doing it in their own little bubble. And then the scary thing was when we started to talk to people that are 5 years, 10 years into their careers, they feel like they're the first ones or they're the only ones. So as a group, we're not connecting enough. We're not sharing that knowledge. We're not pulling each other up enough. So that was sort of the basis of the Roots Inspire concept, where we said, like, okay, let's connect these groups. Let's pull each other up, support each other. There's so much knowledge in our own community, and we know best how to be us, right? So if you get advice from someone that has been there, done it, has been successful, but also knows what it's like to be us, like that's super powerful.
Yeah. It's a whole package. Now, brilliant, Sergio, brilliant. So what's happening? So 2023, we're like 3 years in now with Roots Inspire. It's grown significantly. For anyone watching or listening, I know CBRE are involved. You've got Boots, the chemist.
Boots, Unilever, ABN AMRO, Rabobank, Freshfields. I mean, it's quite a list. Very cool brands to work with.
And you've had about
brands that are dedicated to make that impact, right, and work on that pipeline.
150, 120 maybe mentees go through the program.
Yeah, so we passed 100 like a while ago. So I think we're indeed like 110, 120. We try to work with bigger companies that are front runners, right? Like for us, we want to make a giant impact, right? We want to not only impact individuals, their lives, but we want to change these companies, and then we want to change industry. So if we can work with companies that are front runners in their industry and really work with them for a period of over 5 years to really change their leadership pipeline, like then we start having that impact on the whole industry, because others will look at them and say, wow, okay, well, I can't be left behind. I need to do something as well. And maybe they don't do our program, maybe they do something else, that's fine. But to activate them and say like, okay, it's not just something you discuss, it's something you do, and it's something you commit to for multiple years. Like if we can get that going, I think that's where we will see impact.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just a great idea. Well, it is. I mean, I reached out to you. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I reached out to you last year, and I just love it. I mean, I love what you guys do. Fantastic. So 2023, you've got another couple of programs coming out, and we're now into the second quarter of this year already.
It flies by, huh?
Just unbelievable, isn't it? So is everything on track? Is everything like going as it should in terms of time frames, etc.?
Yeah, well, what we do see happening, and I think eventually it's a good thing, but it's also a bit of a shocker, obviously, is that because of the economic situation, there's a lot more pressure on budgets, right? And I think eventually that scrutiny is good, because I think there was a lot of money spent on diversity and inclusion initiatives without people knowing what works and what doesn't work. So a lot of things, including what we do, is very much still at sort of an exploration phase. Like, we don't really know what works, but let's try this, or let's try to do reverse mentoring internally. Let's try to do a sponsorship program. So different companies try out different things.
Yeah.
We try to combine different things because we think you need that combination of things to really work. But yeah, that scrutiny on measurability is good. That people start to see what works, what doesn't work, and be more focused in their approach.
Yeah.
But it does mean that it takes a lot longer for budgets to come through, for new clients to make a decision.
Onboarding clients.
Yeah. So I mean, for us, we keep on building. We are launching. We've launched a student platform as well, Roots Inspire Students, to inspire students on careers in the corporate world. I think there's not enough resumes coming in. There's a lot of ethnic students that don't see themselves working for a big company. So giving them exposure to ethnic professionals in these companies that can give them a bit of guidance, I think that's something that's needed as well. So we've launched that. We're beginning of next year, most likely we're launching a program for junior professionals. So we now focus on senior professionals to leadership, but I think junior professionals face different issues. So we want a separate program for that as well. Okay. And then we start building that whole ecosystem, right? To have that guidance and support with tools, with a network, with just a community from high school students all the way to leadership, right?
Yeah, wow.
That's what we want to do.
Yeah, amazing, man. Fantastic, superb. Listen, man, I'm conscious of time. Anything else you want to say? We've got a growing audience of listeners and viewers. So take it away. This is your floor to wrap things up. Anything you want to kind of get out there about?
Yeah, I do. Like, I think what you're doing is amazing. I love listening to your podcast. I love seeing sort of the different guests you have on. A lot of very impressive individuals you're able to get on your podcast. So I just want to congratulate you with the work you've been doing.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
And
Means
I'm
a lot,
big
man. Means a lot.
supporter, and I'll continue to be a big supporter.
Superb, superb. Everyone, thanks a lot, man. Let's give it up for Sergio Panday, amazing guest, man, brother from another mother. And yeah, later on this year, we'll do another version, bit of an update on you and Roots Inspire. And congratulations for the new member of the family, man. Maybe I'm not supposed to mention this, man, but I know you've got another.
Dude, you're going to have to cut that off, I think.
Oh, really?
No, leave it in.
Oh, superb.
Yeah. New one color.
Excellent. All right, Sergio, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the support. If you like the content you're hearing in our episodes of Digital Hub, hit subscribe below. Thank you very much.